Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hi, everyone. This is probably the most important interview I will probably ever do. Every single person listening, watching, has been affected by cancer, whether it's you yourself or someone you love. And if you're like me, and I'll tell my story in a minute, you're completely lost when you hear about that, when you hear a cancer diagnosis. So my guest today is Dana Dornsife. She is the founder and CEO of Lazarex Cancer Foundation, and she is going to shed so much light for us on options that I know I didn't know was available, and I'm sure most of you don't. So Dana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Christina.
So let's just start by telling people, what Lazarex is.
So Lazarex Cancer Foundation exists to help patients who are not responding any longer to standard of care therapies that are available navigate through their clinical trial options. So we identify clinical trial opportunities for patients. And then we actually provide financial assistance to the patient and a travel companion so that they can actually afford to get where they need to be in order to take advantage of medical breakthroughs in clinical trials.
And what you're doing is so important. So my story is February, I think 2021. My sister called me that my brother-in-law had a brain tumor. And the first thing I think of is, oh, it's okay. He'll have surgery. Everything will be fine. Well, he had a glioblastoma, and this is in the middle of COVID. And my sister is a mess. She's got teenage kids. We're trying to keep them calm. I'm trying to take notes on the phone from what the doctor is saying. And he says 12 to 15 months, and your heart stops. And so I jump into Christina mode, which is research. There's got to be something that can't possibly be that. And my dear friend, Laura Evans, who is your PR person and your spokesperson, I remembered something she had put out on Twitter about Lazarex. And I called her and I said, what is this? And we reached out to you, and we haven't used you yet because there hasn't been a trial available for him. But people like me, most people listening and watching, don't know what trials are. So can you talk about that? Because I learned so much in my research, but I want people to know there are other options than when your doctor says 12 to 15 months.
Certainly. So, Lazarex provides information and opportunity, right, for patients who may need an alternative to standard of care or available therapies. And that lifeline can be through a clinical trial. And, what most people don't realize is that every single drug that we take right now has gone through the clinical trial process, has received FDA approval, and that's what, keeps us all safe and allows us to benefit from the research and development that's done in the lab. So literally taking the drug from bench in the lab to bedside, at the home. And clinical trials are staged. There's different phases of clinical trials, but when you get into human trials, it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And, a drug, depending upon its effectiveness and safety, will continue to go through those phases. And then if we successfully complete a phase 3, then the FDA will use certain criteria to determine if that drug should be approved or not. And so sometimes, especially for cancer patients, drugs that are available through the clinical trial process really do give a patient their best opportunity for a better outcome.
And so somebody listening has a diagnosis. When did they come to you?
Well, I believe they should come to us as soon as possible. Because, first of all, we don't charge. It doesn't cost anything to do clinical trial navigation. And understanding what your plan B or your plan C is at the beginning is really important, because A, gives you some peace of mind, to know that
Right.
you have that, in your back pocket if you need it. B, it's timely, right? So what you don't want to do is put yourself in a situation where your doctor tells you that there's nothing else he or she can do. And then you start to do the research, because at that point, every day counts. So it's
Right.
really important that you have your plan in place if you need it. Hopefully you won't, right? That would be the best outcome.
Right.
But if you do, you're ready to go. And so, I am a firm believer in, engaging and understanding, that as soon as possible. The third reason that you would want to do that is that sometimes your treatment pathway will determine whether or not you'll actually qualify for a clinical trial. So if
Right.
if you went on standard of care and that didn't work, and your doctor suggests another type of chemotherapy and then a third type of chemotherapy, in some instances, depending on what those alternative chemotherapies are, or, the number of different drugs that you've tried, you may not even qualify for a trial. So it's really important to know what those qualifications are so that you can manage your journey better.
Right. And it's really important. And as you're going through the cancer journey, and that's where we are right now with my brother-in-law. His cancer has come back, and I want everyone to know he's lived 26 months when they told us 12 to 15. So don't always listen to those numbers. I get so angry when they keep saying, well, this is only going to last 6 months. I'm like, well, it's been 12, but it has come back. And the problem in his case is for his type of cancer, they need a sample of the tumor of the regrowth, but he can't have surgery again.
Mm.
It's too dangerous to do another great. So there are so many things involved in trials, and the fact that you all, which I believe is the case, you pretty much hold people's hands through the process and identify, because before I found you, I was on the phone calling UPenn, Duke, MD Anderson, asking, literally getting the doctors on the phone, the scientists who are doing these trials, to see what the qualifications are. And again, this is what I do for a living. I do PR work. I'm constantly researching, but most people wouldn't know how to do that.
Well, yeah, in fact, your journey with your brother-in-law is eerily similar to my journey with my brother-in-law. When my youngest sister called me and said Mike's, been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he was given 3 to 5 months, and through his clinical trial participation, he actually lived for 19. But that journey that we went on was the genesis of Lazarex Cancer Foundation, and just an internal need that I had to really address these issues. And so 99% of the time, the person who's looking into a clinical trial doesn't have a medical degree or a research
No.
background. And so you're literally learning as you go. And I know for me, that meant, keeping medicaldictionary.com open, in my browser, and reading 2 sentences of a protocol, and then looking up 12 words, and like really trying to figure out. And not only that, but the volume of trials that are out there for some types of cancer, you could have 50 or 60 different trials, right? So how do you choose which is right for you? And so we try to bring some clarity to that process, and to utilize the experience and skill sets that we have to help a person wade through all of that information, and hopefully come up with, the top, 5 or 6 or however many trials might be relevant for that individual. It's important to point out we do not make recommendations. A lot of people will ask us, well, what would you do? Or what, what? And we cannot do that. We provide the information, we provide the opportunity, but the process is that patient and their family and medical team taking that information and collectively deciding what it is that they might, be interested in. And we can also make a connection for the patient to the principal investigator or their research team that's conducting that particular trial, so they can get their questions answered.
Right. And that's it's good to know. And B, it's so important. Like I said, I was literally picking up the phone. And actually, I do think somebody at Lazarex was the one who got us in touch at Duke, which for him, they're very well known for glioblastoma research.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have a massive database? I mean, how do you, because I know with me, I narrowed down, who were the top 3 for glioblastomas. And then I went on their website and they list all the trials. And then I got on the phone. You just amalgamate all that information all across the world?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, there is a website called clinicaltrials.gov.
I know it.
And that website, every single FDA approved clinical trial is listed on that website. So that's the good news, is that it's right. All in one place, right? The bad news is that it's not always, 100% representative, because there is a lag time on information updates on clinicaltrials.gov. So the very newest trials may not be listed yet. The status of a trial may not be updated. So it may say enrolling, but it's really not. And so there are some inefficiencies, but it's a great first resource to take a look at in order to kind of whittle down, the options. And then, we have some other resources, just our experience. We know, where other trials for certain types of cancer are being conducted. And so, and other patient experience, right? So we can kind of take a look at that as well. When I started my journey for Mike and looking into pancreatic clinical trials, clinicaltrials.gov was the go-to. And I sadly need to say 17 years later, clinicaltrials.gov is the go-to. And there have been lots of attempts to, put a database, together like that. But that's, our number one still. So.
Wow. You would think with the technology today that somebody would make an easier searchable database to use.
Yeah, it's expensive to do it. Yeah. You're in a constant state of update, and it's hard to monetize something like that in the private sector, right? So there are quite a few challenges to doing that. The other thing, though, is that there are a lot of patient advocacy organizations like Lazarex, but they focus on specific types of cancer. Mm-hmm. And so, contacting those patient advocacy groups is a great idea as well, because they can provide a lot of really sound information and direction in relation to trials that might be available for your particular type of cancer.
And tell us how we do that. You just go to Google and put in the type of cancer and advocacy?
Yes, I would just Google, patient advocacy groups for colorectal cancer or, breast cancer or whatever. And I'm sure it will, result in quite a few options that you can take a look at. I mean, patient advocacy groups exist in order to help patients, their family members, and their caregivers along the journey, with their particular type of cancer, connect them to services and resources. And also connect them in many instances to like a mentor, someone who's been through it already, someone who's been on the type of chemo or radiation or whatever your treatment might involve, right? And can give you a lot of knowledge based on their personal experience, but also comfort in the process too, right? It's a difficult journey, and not just for the patient, first and foremost for the patient, but family members and caregivers have a lot of pressure and stress and strain. And so, anything that you can do in that scenario to alleviate some of that is a good thing.
What other resources? I know, you hear that and you're in shock, and then you just want to do everything you can. So like I said, I just went on the internet and just started looking, but, obviously Lazarex, and I want to walk through Lazarex in a minute, and the advocacy groups. What are some other things you recommend people do when they get that diagnosis? Do you recommend a second opinion? You hear that from your doctor, and like I said, you hear that 12 to 15 months and you don't want to believe it. What do you do next?
Well, often what happens is that patients, you hear the term analysis paralysis, right? Like it's so much to digest, right? Mentally, emotionally. It's like you stop hearing what your doctor's saying. You just hear wah, wah, wah in the background because your mind is reeling, right? From your situation. So it's really important to always have a patient advocate, someone who's your medical advocate with you at every appointment if it's possible, so that individual can, ask the questions, write down the answers, like, keep the conversation moving in a productive way. Right. I remember so many times chatting with my sister after she had an appointment, and I'd say, okay, ask Mike's doctor this and that, right? And then I'd say, well, what did he say? Oh, I forgot to ask him, right? And I'm like, okay. So then I started writing down the questions and emailing them to her, right? And then, she would still forget to do it, right? So it's really important to have an advocate. The other thing I would say is that, and rightfully so, I understand it, but your life is your life and it's in your hands. Many patients are beholden. They feel beholden to their doctor. They don't want to, upset their doctor, or, they look at that person as their champion and they don't want to alienate the champion, right? So they don't ask a lot of questions. They don't ask for a second opinion. Second opinions are important. And most often with a second opinion, we see that, there's confirmation of a diagnosis, but sometimes not. Sometimes a second opinion will take you to the next level of understanding, or will lead to a genomic study or next generation sequence, testing, or, something that will reveal an important piece of information that you can use to determine what your best treatment pathway is.
Yeah, it's so important. And one of the things I'd like to share with people listening that I did with my sister, because we went through the exact same thing, and then she would put me on speakerphone. We started to do that where I would be the one taking the notes. They actually put me on the doctor's list as somebody who could ask questions and get information from. So if my sister, just couldn't do it anymore, I could call the doctor and say, hey, we forgot to ask this. And that has been, because my brother-in-law is still with us, has been really valuable for her. They had a debacle. And again, I'll share the story. So if anybody else goes through this, he's on disability insurance, and somehow the person who checks the boxes at the disability insurance place read the latest report, because they have to update it, checked the wrong box. They canceled his disability insurance, said he had to go back to work. case closed, and you could appeal, but it takes 2 years to appeal. So my sister is beside herself, and I literally called the governor's office, sent a letter to the whatever it's called, like not the director of insurance, but the person who runs the insurance offices. They emailed me back. They said, you have enough to worry about. This was Friday. By Monday morning, he was reinstated. So being your own advocate, you really have to. You can't, like you said, beholden to people. The insurance company says, oh, she's getting ready to put her house on the market because they can't live without the disability insurance. And it was just some admin checked the wrong box. Yeah. So you really have to take, you've got to be a strong advocate for yourself, or have a friend or family member that can do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's so tell us the process of Lazarex. How does it work? So you get a diagnosis, I pick up the phone and I call you. Then what?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of, institution that you're being seen at. If it's a comprehensive cancer center, that is very heavily involved in research and development, right, and clinical trials, then your doctor may suggest, oh, we'll try standard of care. And then, we have these clinical trials that you can take a look at, right? So in that instance, that patient wouldn't need clinical trial navigation necessarily because, they've had or been able to have that conversation with their doctor, but they may need financial assistance, right? And, look at the situation that your sister is in. Look at the situation I had, with my sister and my brother-in-law, right? I mean, the only reason that Mike got to participate in his trial was because he had a family who could write a check, So that's where this financial assistance to cover out-of-pocket travel expense associated with clinical trial participation came from, because we lived that firsthand. And I realized that, that was part and parcel one of the primary reasons that Mike was able to live for 19 months. And his little 4-year-old daughter remembered her dad. She was 6 when he passed away.
I'm sorry.
So it's that financial piece, right? That is so,
but can
so
we
important.
clarify
so
one? I just want to clarify one thing. Trials themselves don't cost money, or do they?
The drug does not cost money.
But it's the getting there.
It's the getting there. And also, if your trial might require that you have a scan every 3 months, but your insurance will only cover, 1 a year, right? You still need to get that scan done in order to stay on that trial, right? And so then it becomes an insurance issue. Oh, my insurance won't cover that, so somebody has to make up that gap. And sadly, that burden in many instances falls on the patient. And many times insurance is inadequate, right? You're underinsured. And so again, a lot of out-of-pocket expense is, the burden falls on the shoulders of the patient. I do want to say it is getting better. There's more attention being paid to this deficit around insurance. It's critically important for cancer patients because, if standard of care has failed, and you've tried other options and they don't work, you will die, right? I mean, clinical trials are your lifeline, right? So patients contact Lazarex Cancer Foundation. We have a travel reimbursement program. They fill out a simple application. It is based on household income. So, we're a nonprofit. We're out there trying to raise money every day to support patients. And so we provide that assistance based on a sliding scale. So there is an eligibility criteria, so we can make sure that we're getting our resources to the people who need it the most. The second option through Lazarex Cancer Foundation is If you're being seen in a community oncology center or in a rural environment, those doctors may not be familiar with clinical trials, and they don't have a lot of research and development going on. So that is where doing clinical trial navigation, and calling us, filling out that application and asking us to do clinical trial navigation is important. And so those are two of, the ways that we, and most often the way that we support patients at Lazarex Cancer Foundation. We also have a program called the Cancer Wellness Hub that is a relatively new program for us. You, Christina, have the benefit of being in PR and understanding research. I have the benefit of I had the benefit of time and opportunity to research clinical trials. But what does someone do when they don't have that? They don't have resources. They don't have time. They don't have, the luxury of being able to navigate through and do all of these things, right? So we started the Cancer Wellness Hub to really help those at-risk communities, along their cancer journey and connect them to resources and services so that we can level the playing field so that everyone has equitable access to the resources and services that are out there.
And how do people access that?
So our Cancer Wellness Hub right now is in 3 locations. We have one in Philadelphia, one in Los Angeles, and one here in the San Francisco East Bay. But we also have program people, coordinators at Lazarex. If you don't live in one of those major areas, we do have cancer care companions who can offer as much information as we have available for, a location, where you are, your geographic area, and try and connect you to other patient advocacy groups that we work with, and, just try and share as much information as possible.
Oh, it's amazing what you're doing. And again, having gone through it and having to stumble my way to find you. That's why I want to share you with my audience and with as
Thank
many
you.
people as I can. How many people have you helped since you started?
Gosh, thousands and thousands.
Oh,
Our first year we helped in 2007, we helped 3 people. Our second year was 14. Our third year was 28. Or, in 2022, we helped almost 1,800 patients in 1 year. And it just keeps growing. But our opportunity to support patients is directly linked to the dollars that we have,
yeah.
and the money that we're able to raise to support them. And so it's really important in order for us to keep going that we are successful in our fundraising efforts.
And how do you, I know with the nonprofit, you've got what you're doing and then the raising funds. So how can people help? Do you get grants? Like what's the
We
best
do it
ways?
all.
Okay.
We do grants, we get corporate sponsors, the private sector
Yeah.
is really a big source of our fundraising. Individuals like you
Yeah.
who've had this life experience who say, hey, we can do better. I want to help someone. And you literally can create, hope and give the gift of life to someone who is in my situation, is in your situation. And we don't save everyone, but we have many, 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 many patients who, have achieved remission when they were told to get their affairs in order, who are, conducting productive lives and, seeing their grandkids grow up, going to college, fulfilling their life's dreams. And so, we just can't ever give up.
No, we can't. So lazarex.org, is that
Yes.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
And normally, we have we're interviewing people, we have fun topics, and not that this is so informative, but I always ask people at the end of every interview, what's your greatest accomplishment since you've turned 50? So I don't know if you want to talk about it personally or what Lazarex has done, but what's the biggest thing?
So I would say, honestly, I am so grateful at 61 years old to be able to live my passion every day. I don't feel like I go to work every day. I may sound odd, because of what I do, in working with cancer patients all the time, but to give the gifts of hope and life are precious. And I remember when I started Lazarex, I said, even if we could just help one person, I will be so grateful. And here we are at over 10,000, right? So I would say that in my lifetime is my best accomplishment.
Oh, I agree. And then where do you see yourself in 10 years?
My goodness. Well, I'd like to think that, I will have a retirement plan between now and then, which would be succession. And I know you introduced me as CEO, but I actually stepped down as our CEO about a year ago. I really want Lazarex to be about Lazarex. So I'm founder, chief mission and strategy officer. And I would love to set us up so that, there's succession in the organization. Of course, I will always support it and always be here. But I really want to focus on my husband, my family, our grandkids, our great grandkids, and, take time to be with them.
Oh, I love that. Well, Dana, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a wealth of knowledge, and we're going to help a lot of people.
Thank you so much, Christina. And this interview helps us get the word out. So thank you.
And everybody listening and watching, I don't ask this, but I'm asking you this. Please share this episode with everybody, with your friends, your family, put it on social media to get the word out. Like I said, I experienced Lazarex firsthand, and I'm helping a friend right now. I sent it to her last night. She had no idea. So as you said, if we can just help one person maybe get in a trial and live another year, 5 years, 10 years, think of how amazing that would be. So please share this episode, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.